Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is David Talbot, Managing Director and Head of Research here at Red Cloud Securities. I'm delighted to host a Red Cloud webinar on gold today. We will hear from Sun Summit Minerals Management, including Sharon Alexander, VP Technical Services, and Robert Willis, CEO of the company. During today's webinar, they will provide an overview and outlook, and then we'll take some questions. You can type your questions at any time into the chat box, and we will get to as many as we can. But before we kick things off, first we need to discuss the fine print. During the Sun Summit webinar, forward-looking statements may be made. I would direct listeners to their forward-looking statements outlined on page 2 of their respective corporate presentations, and that can be found at the company's website, sunsummitminerals.com. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight this webinar for informational purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. And please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures on Sun Summit. So I'd like to now turn it over to Sharon to kick off today's webinar. Sharon.
Thanks, David. So yes, as David mentioned, my name is Sharon Alexander. I'm VP Technical Services. I'm also joined by Bob Willis, who is our CEO. He will be available as well, mostly in the question and answer period at the end of this presentation. So as David mentioned, I will be making forward-looking statements as well. Our presentation will be available on our website, sunsummitminerals.com. So just to go over our Buck property, which is really a very exciting property. It's an intermediate sulfidation gold and silver property that's located in central BC. You can see there it's a large 33,000 hectare tenure package just south of the town of Houston. It's close to existing infrastructure. There's 4 service roads and all-weather access up on site, so we can drive to site year-round. We have 12-month access out of the year, and so really that sets Buck apart from some other projects in BC. So Buck has a lot of advantages in terms of its location, from the infrastructure as well as it's in a active mining region. There's some existing mines, for example, Equity Silver Mine and Huckleberry. However, it's undergoing active exploration at the moment. There's the Silver Queen property just to the south of us. We have the Fenton property, Poplar, as well as Surge Copper has their Utsa and Berg property. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about the high-grade discovery, which was just confirmed, following up on some of our 2020 drilling where we made our first high-grade discovery. So here's an aerial view of the property. So you can see here the Buck property itself. There's moderate terrain. You can see there's a lot of trails transecting on the site, so it's easy to drive right to the drill. Most of the historic drilling has been done in the trench and the horseshoe zones, and you can see the horseshoe there is that little dip in the gorge. It's where a lot of the historic drilling has been done. However, we are expanding this target. Most of our 2021 drilling is in the yellow outline that you see there. As well, we have some extra exploration targets that we've identified through geochemical sampling, which we did last summer, as well as through an IP survey that we ran last fall. We've identified some additional targets. So for example, we have the Buck North zone as a geochemical target. Then we have IP North, West, and South, and then also Buck Southeast. So as of this moment, the Buck property or the footprint is not constrained and we're wide open. So we'll be doing a lot of exploration in the next few months. So of course, the main story here is our high-grade gold discovery. In 2020, we drilled what we're calling our discovery hole. You can see hole 12 right in the middle there. And that hits some pretty great grades. So we're looking at, 17 meters of 5.86 gram per ton gold, including 3 meters of 23 gram per ton gold, 7.5 meters of 10 gram per ton gold, as well as a meter and a half of 49 gram per ton gold. As well, the hole ended in mineralization, so 12 meters of almost of over a gram per ton gold. So that really started the exciting time at Buck. We followed up that program with some additional holes. You can see in the map here, the green traces are the 2021 drill holes. We completed 18 holes for just over 7,000 meters. And we've released 5 drill holes. The rest of the holes are still at the lab, and you can see those green traces there are the ones that are still pending. However, the assays that we have received back from the lab, we've had some spectacular results, which has confirmed that high-grade mineralization that we were seeing in hole 12. So for example, in hole 19, we have 23 meters of 1.51 gram per ton gold, including a meter of 21.7 gram per ton gold. In hole 20, 4 meters of 31 gram per ton gold, as well as half a meter of 246 gram per ton gold. So this is the highest grade that we've ever seen at the Buck property. So very exciting for sure. As well, what's interesting to point out here is that in addition to the high grade gold we're finding in the trench zone, we're also able to confirm and continue to find intercepts of long continuous gold mineralization that maybe is more bulk tonnage grade, similar to what you're seeing, for example, at the Blackwater deposit, which we've been using as a geological analog. So in hole 17, for example, 109 meters of 1.07 gram per ton gold, and that is the longest continuous intercept of gold mineralization that we've drilled on the property. So even though we've only released the first 5 holes from our 2021 program, already it's looking very promising. And we're very excited to get additional holes back from the lab. So I'll just draw your attention to the 2 cross sections here. We have A to A prime, which is an east to west line, as well as B and B prime, which I'll be going over in the next slides. So you can see this section here. You can see hole 12 in the middle, and that was our discovery hole from 2020 with some of those great grades. Now, what's key about this discovery is that it was in an area which was pretty much wide open. It was unknown. A lot of the historic drilling reached depths only about 50 to 100 meters. And so we were drilling into an area where we had very little information. You can see since then, we've drilled the 18 holes. You can see the 5 there that we've just released. We have holes 19 and 20, which are scissoring hole 12, which I'll go over in the next section. As well, we have hole 22 to the west. And all of those green traces are holes that we're awaiting from the lab. So there's tons of potential in the trench zone, especially some deep holes we've done targeting some of the mineralization at depth. Also to point out here in the horseshoe zone, you see these long continuous intercepts of gold mineralization, over 100 meters of 1.07 gram per ton gold, which is within 186 meters of 0.78 gram per ton gold. So that, again, is very comparable to Blackwater style mineralization. There's different styles of mineralization here. So in the horseshoe zone, for example, these long continuous grades are found mostly disseminated throughout some of the more porous rock. Buck itself is a large altered breccia package, and so we're seeing a lot of hydrothermal breccias, volcaniclastics, volcanic rocks. And so the style of mineralization in Buck at Horseshoe is really characterized by, tuffs and volcaniclastic rocks where the gold is disseminated throughout. In the trench zone, on the other hand, we're seeing a lot of quartz veins, and that's where we're seeing a lot of high-grade mineralization within these quartz veinlets, and they're running at different orientations, and so very different styles. As well, we've identified a third style of mineralization, which we're calling mosaic breccia, and I'll show you some pictures towards the end of this presentation. And that's near surface. It's running, around 1 gram per ton gold, and it's proving to be very interesting. And we're still learning the connection between the trench and the horseshoe zone. There's a lot of fluids running through the system. It's very complex. There's a lot of structural controls. There's some dikes running through the system as well. So it's very complex, which is a great sign for mineralization. But every time that we drill a new hole, we're able to learn more about the property. So here's another section, which is just the other orientation. You can see hole 12 in the middle, which is just faded out a bit. And then we have holes 19 and 20, which scissor hole 12. And that's where you can see at the bottom of hole 20, we have that 0.5 meter of 246 gram per ton gold. That lines up very well with what we were seeing at close to the end of hole 12, which is 1.5 meters of 49.6 gram per ton gold. As well, you have the high grades from hole 19. So when you see it from this direction, you can understand how we're able to connect some of these vein-hosted mineralization in the property. But again, all those green traces are yet to be back from the lab, and we're thinking that that will help add to the story for sure and help with our drill planning. So we'll have a look at some VG. On the left, we have hole 12, which we drilled last year. That's the 1.5 meters of 49.6 gram per ton gold. You can see the gold is associated with a veinlet, so it's pyrite, sphalerite, carbonate, and quartz. A lot of sphalerite in the system here. And on the right, this is hole 20. This is where we intersected 0.5 meter of 246 gram per ton gold. And you can see VG right in the middle of that quartz vein associated with pyrite and sphalerite. So we're very excited to see VG. We're seeing it in a lot of the holes from 2020, although we have only had 5 holes back from the lab. Here is some of the sphalerite mineralization. So for example, at the bottom and on the left, this is what we're calling the mosaic breccia. So it's a very angular breccia, sphalerite rich, so zinc rich matrix, which extends to surface. For example, on the upper left, you can see at the horseshoe zone, we took a grab sample, which ran 4.7 gram per ton gold, 86 gram per ton silver, and almost 3% zinc. The core sample at the bottom, again, is mosaic breccia in the area between the horseshoe and trench zones, and that was over 40 meters of over 1 gram per ton gold. So sphalerite and zinc is very important in the system. There's a lot of relationship between zinc and gold. You can see in the top photos there a lot of sphalerite alteration associated with the VG that we're seeing. The hole 17 at the top, that's 0.6 meters of 17.3 gram per ton gold. And then of course the other holes are still awaiting assays back from the lab. So the Buck property itself, you can see the scale, that's 2 kilometers top to bottom, and that doesn't even represent the whole extent of the system. It's really unconstrained at this point. We are learning more every time we drill. So as I mentioned, most of the holes in 2021 so far have been kept to what we're calling the trench and horseshoe zones. However, we do have some holes that we are stepping out to try to test some of these targets. So looking at the map here, you can see there's the geochemical sampling, and that's symbolized by zinc. So the red colors are some of the higher grade zincs, so zinc anomalies. So there's a lot of potential here for drill targets. As well, we're looking at the IP. So that survey was done last fall. This is a 150 meter depth slice. And you can see there's quite a bit of chargeability highs in the area, not just within Trench and Horseshoe, but also towards the north at Buck North, the west, and then also the southeast. So we are systematically stepping out from some of these core areas. You can see on the northwest, we have a hole there right near the 2 kilometer arrow there. So we're stepping out there, as well into the southeast, which actually is a very interesting hole. It was collared in some of the younger volcanics that cover the system. And so if that was to intersect mineralization at depth, that would definitely give us a key to how big the system could actually be. At this moment, it is quite unconstrained. So very exciting to get to do some step out drilling as well as some exploration this summer. So as I mentioned, the Buck property is located within a large 33,000 hectare tenure package. You can see here we have the zinc in soil plotted as well. So knowing that we have such a strong correlation between zinc and gold, we are very happy to see some of these anomalies. There's a lot of anomalies around the Buck property itself to the south and northwest. As well, there's a large target to the south, which is a historic occurrence called Irk. And so we're starting to look at that. It has some historic drilling as well as trenching. And so we've recently announced we will have geologists in the field starting to do some prospecting and mapping and sampling around the regional tenure package. And so Urk is definitely a great target that we're excited to get some results back from. Another thing to point out here is the geology itself. So if you look at the light green, that's what is the late Cretaceous Casalca group. It's volcaniclastic rocks. Actually, Buck itself is hosted by Casalca group. Just under the surface samples there's a little sliver of Casalca. So regionally, it's a very important lithological unit. It actually hosts a lot of similar epithermal deposits such as Blackwater. And so, we have quite a lot of Casalca on our property. We will be actively exploring. You can see in the yellow circles there. So a lot of prospectivity. You look at the scale bar there, it's 24 kilometers north to south. So quite a lot of work our geologists will be doing. So in terms of management, as mentioned, we have Bob Willis on this call, who is our CEO. We also have Tuki Angus, who has been a significant industry player for many years. As well, I'll point out we have Christopher Leslie, who is part of the discovery team at the Blackwater deposit. So we're very lucky to have him as an advisor. In terms of our share structure, just over 54 million outstanding shares, market cap currently around 55 million, and we have about just over 2 million in the bank, with more money coming in through warrant exercise. So what's next? As I mentioned, we will be awaiting assays for the last 13 holes from the 2020 drilling. We will be entering a lot of that data into our models to find some targets for additional drilling that we're hoping to do shortly, as soon as we update our model and get some additional targets ready based on the assays that we're getting back from the lab. Also just announced is we will be starting our field exploration program up at Buck, which will include prospecting, mapping, as well as some pretty robust soil geochemistry surveys. And sorry about that. So the guys are very excited to return back to site. Sorry, I work from home. So yeah, we're pretty excited to find out what's going to come from the summer program. And so we're very excited here at the property. So thank you, David, for the time.
Okay, thank you very much, Sharon. Very good presentation. So we're now ready to kick off the Q&A portion of the webinar. Reminder everybody online that you can type in your questions into the chat box at any time. Sharon, we have a couple of questions we'll get to. So the trench zone and the horseshoe zone, do they both demonstrate the narrow high-grade intercepts and the very wide lower-grade intercepts? And really, what's the main difference between the two zones?
Bob, do you want to take
that? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's a good question. The in the horseshoe zone, where some of the historical drilling was, it really is a very, very faulted and intense alteration area where it appears to be a lot of more porous rocks, more tuffs, and seems to be more of an area where, kind of the 1 gram material over 100 plus meters exists. Having said that, in our hole 17, we did disclose, a pretty high grade intercept within hole 17, which was unknown in that area before. On the trench zone, so far, our discovery hole 12 was some high grade intercepts, which we had not seen on the property before. And then our first release here, the first 5 holes, supported that. But I would suggest that in the trench zone, as we go forward, that, without assays, but the rocks are looking like maybe, there's not equal, but maybe some bulk tonnage type areas as well. So I don't know, or we don't know a distinct difference between the trench and the horseshoe zone. And I would suggest that geologically there may be, but grade wise, maybe not.
Okay, and it looks like there are multiple step-out holes along the trend from hole 20. Can you perhaps elaborate a little bit on the pending holes? What are you targeting that you might expect to assay results?
Yeah, I think the in the trench zone there were a couple holes that were drilled deeper toward the west, and two of them were step outs. A couple hundred meters and another couple hundred meters, and angled toward the west, and they were angled toward some IP anomalies that Sharon was talking about. In the drill core, obviously we can see mineralization. As we've said, there's mineralization in pretty much every hole. So I think those deeper holes, meaning down to 400 or 500 meters plus, will give us some kind of an indication, we think, what's going on to the west. We do have, as Sharon mentioned, a step-out hole about 300 meters to the south, and then one about 400 meters to the east, which has been drilled through some late volcanics, and just to see what's under that area. So, really, these step-out holes are to try and give us an idea of the magnitude of this system. We know that it's open in every direction, and so it's really to give us a hint as what we may need to plan for going forward for continual drilling. So yeah, it's kind of as far as what the targets are, David, it's really hard for us to tell right now, because remember the drill holes that we haven't disclosed yet, or we've drilled in areas where there hasn't been any drilling, so it's kind of in no man's land. And so was hole 12, and so was hole 17. So we'll kind of see.
Mm-hmm. And there's a question here. What sort of drilling depths are you down to at this point? The deposit, if you look at it, it appears to plunge off to the west, but that's not necessarily the case. There could be repetitions at depth as well. Really, you're just scratching the surface. Absolutely,
and that's one of the thank goodness we have one of the top-notch geoscience team, in my opinion, and every week we have our meeting, and they're scratching their head more than they were the week before. So we, as far as depth, we see mineralization down to 300 plus meters, 400 meters. I mean, I say it's mineralization. We don't know gold grades, but it's mineralized. And as far as there is some faulting, there's some movement in this area, and so it's a bit of an evolving story here, where maybe there's a little more to this story here at depth than what we have known so far. But again, every week, and once we get assays back, we just keep modeling and remodeling, and it's a pretty neat story that's coming together. But I suggest that until we get all the assays back of what's currently in the lab, which is 18 holes, we're not going to really know. Even at that point, our guys are still going to be scratching their head. So this thing is open everywhere. Yeah, and I guess, do you have timing on those on the remaining holes here? And I guess, are you planning on going deeper in the short term, or do you think you'll hit some of the trend that's closer to surface first? Well, I guess it's probably two parts to that answer. On some of the deeper drilling that we may do, we probably will be drilling through some near surface mineralization on the way down. So maybe we have, not knowing the orientation of the mineralization and the units, maybe there's flat lying stack zones. Maybe there's, another phase of mineralization that's more vertical sandwiched in between. So, I mean, this is a multi-phase mineralizing system. And I think not only does this have implications to where we're currently drilling, but I think property wide. And so as far as depth is concerned, I think we really need to get the majority of our assays back before we start drilling into certain areas. We really need to see, excuse me, what the gold grades are. Again, it's been very difficult for the field guys to really look at the core and say, oh, that's going to run a gram, that's going to run 10 grams. We've been surprised. We're looking at core, and that's basically, I would suggest, hole 12 when it was first drilled. It was like, well, yes, it's mineralized, looks okay, but when the assays come back, we went, wow, that's interesting. So, and we've kind of confirmed that with the first 5 holes in this last release. So, I don't, it's really kind of a no answer, I guess, to your question there, because we just don't know. We just really need to see where the gold is, and there's gold in every drill hole, so I can't. Let's just, we're going to have to wait. And timing on results. I mean, I think we're trying to put the results out in batches just because of the backlog in the lab. So, most likely, very shortly we'll have another batch, whether that's 5 or 6 holes, something like that, and maybe another batch, and maybe a batch after that. But hopefully, in the next, 6-7 weeks, we'll have everything out. We hope, but we'll just see.
Okay, good. Thank you. Are the strongly altered hydrothermal breccias your main target rock mineralization, or does it matter what rocks you're drilling into as long as they're the Kostalka group volcanics? Or is this more about structure?
I think all of the above. We do see in the Trent zone more veins, veinlets, fracture filling type mineralization, and we see a disseminated as well. Whereas in the horseshoe zone, we see primarily a lot of disseminated mineralization in the matrix, in the class of the breccias. So we don't know at this point in time if there's a preferential style of mineralization. Like, for example, in the Trent zone, if you look at the drill core, if you didn't really know what you're looking at, you'd look at it, man, that looks like a stockwork. That looks like sheeted veins. It looks like there's so many different styles in there. And so until we get an idea of orientation, and again, that's going to be part of our ongoing program, we need to do some oriented core. We just got to get an idea, what way structures, veins, veinlets are going. And you know what? It wouldn't surprise me if we don't figure that out and the whole thing's mineralized, which we see. So again, we want to be careful that we don't try and get too zoomed in on this thing. But I think the picture is much bigger than what we see right now.
Okay, so speaking of a larger picture, can you talk a little bit about the zinc and soil anomalies on the various areas of the property? You're getting some very high-grade zinc in areas where you're getting some high-grade gold as well. And, what does this suggest about upside potential at Buck and elsewhere on the property?
Right. Yeah, I think stepping back to just when we first acquired the property, I mean, we kind of recognized there was a relationship between zinc and gold, but not always, but in a lot of cases. And so we then went back into some of the historical surface work that had been done 35, 40 years ago, and saw there were some broad zinc anomalies to the south and elsewhere in the property, plus right over where the historical drilling was done, where we are drilling. And so we went back and we did a soil survey over where we're currently drilling and confirmed that. So really the zinc is, plus others like, antimony and lead, a little bit of silver, are just pathfinders. But even in our current drilling, and again, the surface geochem with soils is important, but that relationship from surface geochem zinc anomalies to what's in the ground, we've confirmed that what we're currently drilling. I mean, there's in our last news release, we definitely are showing that there's significant zinc where we find gold. Not always, but in most cases. So to the south, where Sharon talked about the Irk property, and in other areas of the property, we just feel that, I'm not totally convinced that where we're drilling is the best on the property. I suggest maybe there's equal, or, who knows, but, there's some zinc anomalies to the south and other areas that we're going to confirm over the next 2 months here that they're significant. So, yeah, I mean, if that relationship holds up with a property that's 23 or 4 kilometers in one direction and 12 or 13 in the other direction, we got a lot of room to find some more bucks.
Great, good. That's a great lead into my next question. What sort of geophysical methods are you using to try to find that next discovery, either near surface or at depth? And how well does the geophysics that you have used so far relate to the zinc and soil anomalies?
Yeah, I would say that IP is probably the best tool so far that we've seen. We have done some mag, and I think that's a little uncertain as to the meaningfulness there. But on the IP, I mean, that just, is just signaling hopefully sulfides. And we've seen that in the Trent zone and in the Horseshoe zone. There's sulfides everywhere. And so you're going to get these IP blobs here and blobs there. And so far it's shown us that, there's just an increase in sulfides. And so elsewhere in the property, if we do IP, and we get, some other, nice blobs, if you will, or, IP highs, then, it most likely will be suggesting sulfides. The minerals it contains, who knows? But sometimes if it looks like a duck, it is a duck. So.
Yeah. Which zone are you typically seeing this best gold zinc association?
I'm sorry, I missed that question, David.
Yeah, which zone are you seeing the best gold zinc correlation? Is it more in the high grade narrow zones, or is it can you even find it in sort of the broad lower grade zones?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think so far it seems to be more associated with the broader, I call it lower grade, if you will, but like in the Trent zone. So far, in what we've disclosed, yeah, we got this higher grade mineralization, but that's sandwiched in half gram or up to a gram that has it seems to be more elevated zinc in the surrounding rock. So some of these in the Trent zone, especially in some of these higher grade veins, veinlets, etc., it's possibly just another pulse that has been just supercharged with gold and not too much sphalerite or zinc. Then there's another pulse that's supercharged with gold and sphalerite. So I mean, it's just, there's a number of pulses here that we just don't know what came first. So it's kind of a nice problem to have.
Yeah, we're only 5 holes into this project, or program so far, but has there been any metallurgical testing on the mineralization yet?
No, not to any extent, no at all. And that's definitely something that we've been thinking about. Part of that equation is, when you send in samples for met work, you try and have a representative sample of something that's going to be meaningful. So far, where we're drilling and will continue to be drilling, it's just we're seeing so many styles of mineralization, so many different modes. I'm not sure yet that we can really pick out a representative sample or samples. And so, no question, we'll do met work at some point, but let's kind of be sure it's going to represent what the big picture is here. But Anyway, I suppose part of that answer is that if we see native gold, that's usually not a met problem.
Okay. How does Buck compare geologically to other nearby deposits, such as the 8 million ounce Artemis Blackwater deposit?
Yeah, I think the similarity and to the Blackwater and the Buck. I mean, I think Sharon mentioned it. Thank goodness Chris Leslie, who's one of our advisors, kind of recognized that. And really, it's the style of mineralization. And so there's like 4 primary styles of mineralization at Blackwater according to their public documents, and from little pinhead type disseminations to veins to veinlets to all kinds of different styles of breccia, and we see in high consistent manganese through everything, and the zinc correlation. And so again, it's not, I wasn't at Blackwater in the discovery, but Chris was in 2008, and honestly, the zinc correlation to gold maybe wasn't recognized at the beginning. So I think what we really do is see in the comparison is the style of mineralization and the magnitude of how much the rocks are juiced up and really, really altered through a large area. So the similarity, I guess, is in the style and the age of the rocks. The age of the rocks is identical. And so we think that we're and that kind of relates to a much larger area, that we think is very important. And that parlays into what I just said about what else is on the Buck property as we see it at 33,000 hectares. So, we're in the right age of the rocks, the right style of mineralization, looks like, feels like.
Okay. And then I guess this is probably our last question here. You're really just scratching the surface. You do have some critical mass at Trench and Horseshoe areas, but I don't think we're here for 1 million ounces. I think we're looking for multi-million ounce discovery here. I guess to wrap things up, and hopefully you haven't really answered this question yet, but can you just perhaps elaborate on the district scale potential of the property as a whole?
Yeah, well, that's probably in a definitive way not one that I'm going to answer, but the first thing is that we need to find a deposit. I think we're probably on our way to getting to that point, and then hopefully we can make that an ore body. I suggest that within the Buck property itself, we're well on our way to that sequence, and I suggest that there could be more than one, so more than one epicenter. And again, I think I mentioned it earlier on. We don't know at this point in time if where we're drilling on the Buck in the Horseshoe and the Trench zones, that may not be the epicenter. That may not be the best of the best, even in that area. We might be just clipping the edge of something, and so we've got very, very few holes. And again, just getting back to Blackwater, I think, according to what Chris said, their kind of main discovery didn't really happen until they had like 50 holes in it or something. And then, 150 holes after that, they kind of figured out what was going on. We got minuscule holes in Buck. So anyway, I know I did not answer your question, but I think we're on to something that could be large.
Yeah. Okay. So do you expect to just keep drilling in Buck, or you might push the drills to other parts of the project?
I think for now, we will probably focus on the area that we're currently drilling. We may step out a little bit, just as Sharon mentioned, we've got a 2-3 kilometer sort of zone there. We may, go to the north and whatever, but I think we'll focus there right now. And then once we get our summer program done on other parts of the property, we'll see what that beholds. We'll, at that point, get permitting in place to take that to the next level. But we're going to be aggressive. I mean, this next 2 months on the property wide is going to be very aggressive. We got, I think I counted 5 geos that are going to be running around there banging rocks and doing that for the next couple months. So we're going to hit it hard.
Right. And how many months of drilling could you fund at your current burn rate?
Sorry, I missed that, David.
How many months of drilling might you be able to fund at your current burn rate?
Oh gosh, I don't know how many months. I mean, I think we're at a stage right now where there's so many I guess, pleasant surprises from our drilling that we're seeing, that we're just trying to, not really just drill holes for the sake of drilling holes at this point in time. We're trying to really understand a little better, where we go next, because, we're drilling in areas that's never been drilled before, and we're seeing mineralization. We'll wait for assays and see what that beholds. But our current situation, including our summer exploration program, is funded, and we're evaluating almost weekly what the next step is here. But it's going to be a big step.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We don't have any more questions, so I'd like to thank Bob and Sharon from Sun Summit Minerals today. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Reminder that Red Cloud Securities will be back tomorrow afternoon with Timothy Lee. Will sit down with Golden Future